Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. You know, there's been a lot in the news recently. There's been the CIA torture report and the torture summary that people have actually been able to see. And, you know, that's really got a lot of people up in arms, if you will, and I would say rightly so. Because, you know, there should not be torture being done by the U.S. government. It's completely wrong, in my opinion. Although there are polls that have come out saying that anywhere between 2/3 to 90% of Americans believe that torture can, you know, either sometimes, rarely, or pretty much all the time be justified. There are other reports that show, based on breakdowns of various techniques that were used, that people don't necessarily think that they are right. But just because people think that it can be justified doesn't mean that they think that it's something that, you know, should be done or is right to be done. It just means that if you come up with a good enough story, they'll say, well, you know, it's wrong to do, but in this case, we kind of had to. And I could talk about that, but I'm not going to. There's also the news out of Washington, D.C. about Cuba. And while that actually is very exciting to me, not because I think that, you know, Cuba is a wonderful place. It's certainly a communist country. But the fact that the U.S. government is finally, after nearly 50 years, going to lift the embargo and try to maybe, you know, not punish the people of Cuba as much, because that's really what sanctions and embargoes do. Sanctions and embargoes don't hurt the people that are making a bad country a bad country. Sanctions and embargoes wind up hurting the people that live in those countries. So you're punishing the people because they happen to live in a place with a bad government. Now, one thing that I will get into in the show is the lawsuit against the state of Colorado, rather, by two of its neighbors, Oklahoma and Nebraska. But first, I want to talk about the school that punished a blind child by taking away his cane and giving him a swimming pool noodle. I wish that this was a story from The Onion or some other satire news site, but no. It's from Fox 2 in St. Louis. And the story actually comes out of Kansas City, but Fox 2 from St. Louis has the initial story that I'm going to cover here. It says parents are outraged after they say an elementary school punished their blind child by replacing his cane with a pool noodle. Dakota Novzinger attends Gracemore Elementary School in Kansas City. The 8-year-old was born without eyes, something in the medical world known as bilateral anophthalmia. Hopefully I pronounced that right. If not, you know, feel free to berate me later. School district spokeswoman Michelle Cronk told Fox 4 in Kansas City that Dakota hit somebody with his cane while riding the bus. She says they took away his cane and gave him a pool noodle because he needed something to hold. Cronk says Dakota fidgets without his cane. Dakota's father, Donald, said his son lifts his cane sometimes and the bus driver thought he was using it violently. Dakota said they never said they were going to give me this, or rather, they said they were going to give me this for the next 2 weeks. The family claims the cane was taken away as a way of humiliating him for misbehaving. The father says all around he's a good little guy, and he shouldn't be treated the way he's being treated. Well, now there's an update. This happened, the initial story came out on the 17th. And now there's an update. The school that took the blind boy's cane, this from Fox 13 in Salt Lake City. Don't ask me why I could not find a story actually out of Kansas City, but I could not. Granted, I didn't really look super hard, but I do find it interesting that neither of the stories that I have about a story from Kansas City is actually from Kansas City. The Fox 13 Salt Lake story says the school that took a blind boy's cane and replaced it with a pool noodle as punishment is now apologizing. The North Kansas City School District admitted that it made a mistake and has returned the cane to the 8-year-old. The school district released a statement to WDAF that says, the district has reviewed the situation. We regret that a mistake was made in making sure the student was in possession of his cane when he boarded the bus Monday evening. The district has apologized to the family and is working to rectify the situation. After the incident, the National Federation of the Blind donated a new cane to the boy so he would have an extra one at home. Now, that's very nice of the people over there at the National Federation of the Blind, but it's something that never should have needed to be done in the first place. The National Federation of the Blind never should have been in the situation of needing to donate a cane to an 8-year-old boy. Or at least not this 8-year-old boy, because this 8-year-old boy never should have had his cane taken away by the school. And they are not alleging that he actually did anything violent with the cane. They're saying that he lifted it while on the bus, and the bus driver thought that he was being violent. There's no reports that he assaulted anyone with his cane. There are no reports of that. None at all. And I can guarantee you, if there was a report of that, it would be in one of these two news stories. Or when you do a Google search for blind kid pool noodle, then it would come up in somewhere of blind kid given a pool noodle after assaulting someone with his cane. But that's not what happened. There was overreaction by the bus driver, and then super overreaction by the school district. And I am glad that, ultimately the school district issued an apology, but it was an apology for something that never should have been needed because they should not have taken the action that they took. All in all, way overblown. Not the media coverage, because I do think that the media, there should be media coverage of things like this. But the reaction by the bus driver and the school district never should have happened the way that it did. So let's talk about Colorado. And not because, Colorado, they've got mountains and trees and cannabis. But Colorado, because they have legalized cannabis, they are now facing a lawsuit from two of their not-so-friendly neighbors. And I'll tell you about that when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorkFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So, what exactly is going on in Colorado that has caused two of the not-so-friendly neighbors, Oklahoma and Nebraska, to file a lawsuit against the state of Colorado? Well, the story here from UPI says, in a lawsuit filed Thursday with the U.S. Supreme Court, Oklahoma and Nebraska argued that marijuana bought legally in Colorado is leaking across their borders. In their complaint, the two states argue that Colorado's legalization of recreational cannabis is unconstitutional. In 2012, voters in Colorado and Washington voted in favor of legalization in referendums and have since been joined by Oregon, Alaska, and Washington, D.C. Although, as part of the budget agreement that Congress recently passed, or at least what came out of the House, I don't think it has yet been ratified by the Senate, the legalization of cannabis in Washington, D.C. is being overridden by Congress. And that's one of the things that is specific to the District of Columbia, that Congress can basically veto anything that happens in Washington, D.C. And it appears as though Congress might be vetoing the legalization of cannabis in Washington, D.C. But what I find really odd about this is the fact that there are, basically the attorneys general of two states, Oklahoma and Nebraska, have decided to sue Colorado because legal cannabis is coming into their state. Well, what I find really odd about this is there has never been any kind of lawsuit about illegal cannabis being brought into a state, because they know, or at least they should know that certain strands get brought in from certain places. There have been reports recently that with medical cannabis being legalized in 23 states in the U.S. now, and recreational being legalized in a handful, that the amount of cannabis being produced in Mexico and then exported illegally into the U.S. has decreased by somewhere near 50%. So that it just boggles my mind that there's lawsuits over legalized cannabis being brought in somewhere, but there has never, to my knowledge, been a lawsuit about illegal cannabis being brought in from somewhere else. The article here continues. It says legalization in some states has led to what the attorneys general of Oklahoma and Nebraska are calling a dangerous gap in federal enforcement of drug laws. Lawyers for the two states said marijuana flows from this gap into neighboring states, undermining plaintiff states' own marijuana bans, draining their treasuries, and placing stress on their criminal justice system. No. Lawyers, you guys have this backwards. The fact that cannabis is still illegal in Oklahoma and Nebraska and most of the other states in the country, that is what is putting a stress on the treasuries or rather draining the treasuries and placing stress on the criminal justice system. You're blaming people that aren't responsible for what you're doing. It would be akin to me saying, well, I'm on a diet, and my neighbor keeps going to the buffet, and he's putting a drain on me. He's stressing me out over here. Because they're blaming other people for what they're doing. It's not the legislators' fault in Colorado that you have bad laws in Oklahoma and Nebraska. It's not the fault of the people in Colorado that the law enforcement officers in Oklahoma and Nebraska are going out of their way to arrest people for doing something that has no victim. So, no, you're placing the blame in the wrong spot, and hopefully the U.S. Supreme Court agrees with me. The article here continues. It says, Attorney General John Suthers said the lawsuit has no merit. He suggested that Nebraska and Oklahoma are mainly concerned about the federal government's failure to enforce federal drug laws. And then the article mentions something that is more related to the federal policy, but it's still very interesting, and I think it definitely applies in this case. The article says, the Obama administration has said states that legalize cannabis must ban sales to minors and take steps to keep cannabis sold legally from crossing the borders. Recently, the Justice Department said tribal organizations can also decide to legalize growing and selling of cannabis as long as they meet those standards, even if they are in states where cannabis is illegal. Nebraska Attorney General John Bruning said cannabis purchased in Colorado has become increasingly common in the western part of his state, and that, quote, Nebraska taxpayers have to bear the cost. Well, yeah, they only have to bear the cost if you guys have bad laws and you keep enforcing bad laws. If all of a sudden you made it illegal for people to have grass in their yard, then, you would be burdening your taxpayers. Don't blame the people that live in states that have grass in their yard. Don't blame the people that, you cannot have a garden in your front yard. And then people move out there and, they live in the middle of nowhere. They put a garden in their yard. And, all of these people moving here, they're burdening the taxpayers. Well, no, you're burdening the taxpayers with bad laws and enforcing bad laws. It's your fault, not somebody else's. Take effing responsibility. The article here concludes. It says, Bluff County Sheriff Mark Overman agreed, saying he is glad that the state is suing, saying, quote, this stuff is illegal here. It's coming here, and it's had an adverse effect on our citizens and way of life. Nebraska, from highest elected officials on down, should do something about it. And I agree. They should do something about it. They should remove the statutes and the regulations and the laws that make cannabis illegal in the state of Nebraska, and they should stop burdening the taxpayers by incarcerating people for owning a plant. Because that's what cannabis is. Cannabis is a plant. And as Cat Williams says, if you should just happen to set it on fire, it has some side effects. Now, other things that are perfectly legal also have side effects. Nutmeg, for example. Nutmeg's not illegal. You can go into the grocery store and buy ground nutmeg. But if you smoke enough of it, you can actually die from smoking nutmeg. It'll get you high. It'll give you a high very similar to cannabis. But unlike cannabis, you can die from smoking nutmeg. But nutmeg's not illegal, so they're not going to arrest you for doing it. Stay tuned to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Opening a wallet is quick and easy, and for merchants, there are no transaction fees on the first $1 million worth of transactions. I trust Coinbase. You should too. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorkFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So, did you hear about the journalist that was arrested for reporting on riots in Ferguson? Well, I'm sure you heard about the two that were arrested sitting in a McDonald's, but there have been others. And at least one of them has actually filed a lawsuit. And I have that story now from Reuters. The journalist, the journalist isn't from Reuters, but the article is from Reuters. Reuters reports a Washington-based journalist has sued St. Louis County and one of its police lieutenants, saying his rights were violated when he was arrested while covering protest over the killing of an unarmed teenager by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. Gerald Yinkst, a reporter and producer with News to Share, that's news, the number 2, share, all one word, no space, also accuses police of defaming him by announcing his arrest on Twitter and saying he had refused a commander's order to clear the street, which damaged his professional reputation. A St. Louis Police Department spokesman referred inquiries about the lawsuit to the St. Louis County Counselor's Office, and Reuters reports that no one was there to answer the calls on Thursday. Yinkst was one of 2 people detained on November 22nd, during one of the nightly protests outside the Ferguson Police Department while the grand jury was still in session deciding whether or not to charge Darren Wilson with the shooting death of Michael Brown. And, of course, as you know, the grand jury eventually declined to indict, but this arrest has nothing to do with whether or not the grand jury indicted, but they, included it in the article here. The article continues. It says the lawsuit filed by Yinkst in U.S. District Court in Missouri on Tuesday named St. Louis Police Lieutenant James Vollmer as a defendant and specifies that Vollmer is being sued in his individual capacity. It also sues St. Louis County for allegedly failing to train and supervise Vollmer and for defamation. Now, before I continue, let's just look at this in light of the Supreme Court ruling on Monday. That Supreme Court ruling, you may recall, says that police officers are now given leeway in, having a reasonable misunderstanding of what the law actually says. So in light of that, because the way court precedent works is once there's a decision, it doesn't matter whether the incident in question happened before the decision came out. It matters whether or not the courts hear the case after the decision comes out. So in this case, the police officer is being sued. The police officer in this case is being sued for allegedly not having proper training and for then violating someone's rights because he did not have proper training. The lawsuit says that Yingst was standing on the sidewalk outside the police headquarters, recording attempts by police officers to clear protesters from the street. Then, Vollmer allegedly pointed at Yingst and told a group of patrolmen, "Lock him up." Yingst says that protesters and other reporters standing alongside Yingst were not arrested, and, quote, "no reasonable officer would have believed that Vollmer had a probable cause to arrest Yingst." So, based on and in light of the court ruling on Monday that said that police officers are given some leeway in a reasonable misunderstanding or misinterpretation of the law, as well as of the facts, because they, according to the Supreme Court, the Fourth Amendment gives that sort of leeway for a misunderstanding of the facts. But now they have a leeway on a reasonable misunderstanding of the law. Now, I wonder if the federal court here is going to give Vollmer that reasonable leeway in his interpretation of the law in, having Yingst arrested. And it doesn't specify what the other person was arrested for that was arrested on the night of November 22nd, which was the night that Yingst was arrested. The article does continue, though. It says, shortly afterwards, the police department tweeted using the journalist's official Twitter handle @Trey Yingst, reporter from D.C., taken into custody for failure to disperse. Was asked to leave the street by the commander and refused. #Ferguson. The lawsuit, which was filed for Yingst by attorneys from the American Civil Liberties Union, accuses the county of publicly disclosing information that it knew to be false and for harming the reporter's professional reputation in the process. Now, it's going to be interesting to see where the courts come down on this, primarily because in a lot of ways this is a First Amendment case. Even though he's not suing, specifying that it's a First Amendment case. He's alleging just, the article doesn't even specify which of his rights he claims were violated, but he does specify that his character was defamed and that his professional reputation was harmed. But it doesn't say specifically which rights he is alleging were violated. So probably he is saying that it was a First Amendment violation. And based on some of the more recent court rulings, such as the Glick decision that says that, essentially you have a right to film police while they're on duty in the performance of their jobs as long as you give them a safe remove. Now, nowhere in the lawsuit does it specify what safe remove means. That's up for individual interpretation. And I've actually got a friend that is preparing for a trial. He's got trial on, I believe, New Year's Eve of all days. He was arrested for covering an incident here in Keene, New Hampshire, where there was a suicidal man who I think had a knife or a gun pointed at himself. He was not threatening anyone else. The Keene Police Department decided to roll out the Bearcat because, when you're suicidal, the thing that makes you not be suicidal anymore is seeing an effing tank roll up on the scene. Well, the guy eventually was shot by police, and he was shot after my friend was arrested, and my friend is preparing a First Amendment case because he was there as media covering the scene, and they told him to back up. He backed up. They told him back up again. He backed up again. Then they came a third time, told him to back up, and he was like, I've already moved twice. I'm not moving again. Well, there was a lawyer that said if they tell you back up 2 miles, you back up 2 miles, and then you file a suit alleging that your rights were violated. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in this case. This is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online, fppradio.com.